3 years earlier, before the courtroom, before the auditorium, before any of it, I was just the daughter nobody bothered to look at twice. I need to go back further than that, actually. Back to the beginning, when I still believed hard work meant something in that house. My name is Maya Lin. For 5 years, I worked 18-hour days on something I never once mentioned at family dinners, because I'd learned by the time I was 12 that anything I built could be taken and given to Chloe with a smile, and a "she'll need this more than you." Our house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in Fremont, the kind of place with manicured lawns and a basketball hoop nobody used anymore. My room was in the back, above the garage, where the Wi-Fi was weakest and nobody ever knocked. That suited me fine. I'd converted it into something between a bunker and a shrine, 3 monitors, a server rack humming under the window, drives labeled in my own private shorthand so that even if someone looked, they wouldn't understand what they were looking at. Chloe's room was at the front of the house, over the porch, with the good light and the good Wi-Fi and the door our mother always left cracked open, just to check on her. Nobody ever needed to check on me. I was fine. I was always fine. That was the whole problem. My father called it getting lost in your little projects, whenever I explained what I was building. My mother called it hiding from the family, whenever I skipped dinner because I was 3 hours into a debugging session that couldn't be paused without losing the thread. Chloe called it nothing at all because Chloe had never once asked me what I did up there. She didn't need to. She had already decided the answer was nothing that matters. The algorithm started as a thesis idea in my last year of grad school, a neural architecture that could optimize itself in real time, shedding dead weight and rebuilding its own pathways the way a body heals a wound. I called it privately only to myself Continuum Asterisk. It sounds naive now, giving something a name like that, like I was raising a child instead of writing code. But by year 3, it didn't feel naive. It felt like the only thing in my life that had ever loved me back in the specific currency I understood: effort matched by result. I built fail-safes into everything because I'd learned that lesson early too. Not from cybersecurity textbooks, from my family. There was the time in high school I built a class scheduling app for the debate team, and Chloe took the login credentials off my desk and told the coach she'd built it. And I said nothing, because saying something meant a fight, and fights in our house always ended with me being the one who needed to grow up and stop making everything difficult. There was the science fair project in 10th grade, the one that placed regionally. The one my mother took a photo of Chloe standing next to for the family Christmas card while I stood outside the frame holding the actual trophy. By the time I built Continuum, I didn't build it naively. I built it like someone who already knew on some buried animal level that someone was going to try to take it. I just didn't think it would be my parents. I didn't think they'd be the ones to hold me down for it. That's the part people don't understand when I try to explain it later. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a corporate rival. It was the 2 people who used to hold my hand crossing the street. Chloe found out about the money in March. Not from me. I would never have told her, not out of secrecy exactly, more out of a bone-deep instinct that anything valuable near Chloe eventually became Chloe's. She found out because I'd made the mistake of taking a call in the kitchen, thinking everyone was out. A call from a former professor who'd connected me with a venture fund doing early diligence on autonomous learning systems. I used words like asterisk valuation and acquisition interest and asterisk 9 figures, conservatively asterisk, because that was, conservatively, what the fund had floated. Chloe was on the stairs. I didn't see her until I hung up. She didn't say anything right away. She just looked at me the way she used to look at a store window when we were kids, deciding whether she wanted something enough to cry about it in the parking lot until she got it. 3 days later, she brought it to our parents at dinner, except she didn't call it what it was. She called it concern. "I just think it's kind of selfish," she said, cutting her chicken into smaller and smaller pieces without eating any of it, "that Maya's sitting on something worth that much money and won't even talk about it with the family. Like, we're supposed to be a team." My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Is that true, Maya? You're going to be some kind of millionaire and you didn't say anything." "It's not finished," I said. "It's not worth anything until it's finished, and even then it's not. It's not family money, Mom. It's 5 years of unpaid work that I did alone in my room while everyone thought I was being antisocial." "Nobody said antisocial," my father said, in the mild, wounded tone he used when he wanted me to feel like the aggressor. "We're just saying. Your sister is trying to get her business off the ground. She's got investors interested. If you've already got something built, something similar, wouldn't it make more sense to combine efforts as a family?" Chloe's business at that point was a slide deck. 11 slides, most of them stock photography, one of them a mission statement that used the word disrupt 4 times. She had 0 lines of functioning code. She had never taken a computer science class beyond the one our parents paid a tutor to help her pass in undergrad. What she had was charisma, a talent for making people feel like believing in her was a form of good taste, and a habit of describing other people's labor in the first person once she decided it belonged to her. "No," I said, "it doesn't make sense. It's not the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing." I remember my mother's face doing something complicated then. Not anger, not yet. Calculation. I didn't recognize it as the specific expression of someone deciding to stop asking and start planning, but I understand it now, replaying it. The way you understand the smell of gas only after the whole kitchen has already gone up. "We'll talk about it later," she said and smiled and passed the bread. I should have left that night. I think some animal part of me knew it, the same part that built the failsafe 2 years earlier without consciously deciding to. I didn't leave. I went back up to my room and I kept working, because work was the only language in that house I'd ever been fluent in, and because some small, stupid, hopeful part of me still believed that if I just finished the thing, if I just made it undeniable, they would finally see me instead of the utility they'd built me into. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were soup night, my mother's one culinary specialty, a lentil soup she made from her own mother's recipe, and I remember being grateful for it, actually grateful, sitting at that table eating something that tasted like childhood while my parents asked polite, unusually attentive questions about my sleep schedule, and whether I'd been eating enough and did I want second. "I want seconds," I said. I remember that specifically because it's the last clear, unmanipulated memory I have of that night. Wanting more soup, not suspecting anything, not one cell of me suspecting anything. The next 11 hours are not memories. They're gaps with symptoms around the edges. A heaviness behind my eyes that started sometime after 9. A sense of my own hands feeling very far away, like objects I was operating by remote control. My mother's voice, oddly gentle, telling me to just lie down for a minute, "Sweetheart, just rest your eyes." I have to reconstruct the rest from what came after, from the server logs, from the security camera I didn't know still had a working memory card, from the biometric access history that doesn't lie even when everyone around you does. At 11:42 p.m., someone carried or dragged me from the kitchen to my bed. At 11:58, my bedroom door was opened from the outside using the spare key my mother had always insisted on keeping for emergencies. At 12:14 a.m., my primary backup drive, the encrypted one, the one that required a fingerprint to unlock, my fingerprint, no one else's, registered a successful biometric authentication. Mine, my fingerprint, pressed onto the scanner by someone else's hand while I was unconscious. At 12:20, a transfer began. 5 years of work, 341,000 lines of code, 4 years of training data, the entire architecture of something I had built alone in a room nobody ever bothered to check on, moved, in 11 minutes and 40 seconds, onto an external drive that the access logs would later show belonged to Chloe. At 12:41, my desktop workstation received a remote wipe command, issued from an admin account that had existed on my machine since I was 19 years old, and my father had insisted on having emergency access to my computer, an account I'd forgotten to disable because I had never, not once, imagined I would need protecting from the people who gave it to me. By the time I opened my eyes the next morning, disoriented, my mouth tasting like metal, my thoughts moving through something like wet cement, my life's work was already gone. I just didn't know it yet. The first thing I felt was the silence. 3 monitors that should have hummed with the low mechanical warmth of a machine that never fully slept were black. Not sleeping black, not screensaver black. Dead black, The kind of black that comes from a system that has been told explicitly to stop existing. I sat down at my desk still wearing yesterday's clothes, still moving like my joints had been replaced with someone else's. And I pressed the power button, and I waited and nothing happened, and I pressed it again. And I want to be honest about what that felt like. It felt like watching a body that isn't breathing and telling yourself it will breathe if you just wait one more second. It took 4 hours to understand the scope of it. 4 hours of forcing my sedated brain through diagnostics, checking drive after drive, watching directory after directory return empty, watching my own reflection in a black screen ask a question I didn't have an answer to yet. Where did it go? I found my parents in the kitchen. My mother was doing the crossword. My father was reading something on his phone with the specific too casual posture of a man rehearsing calm. My computer's wiped, I said. Everything's gone, 5 years of work, it's just gone. My mother looked up like I'd told her the weather had changed. What do you mean, gone? I mean the drives are empty. I mean someone accessed my biometric backup last night at 12:14 in the morning. I mean I need you to tell me if either of you know anything about that. That was the moment. If you want to know exactly where the last soft, hopeful part of me finally died, it was in the 4 seconds of silence after that sentence, watching my mother's face rearrange itself from confusion into something more deliberate, more rehearsed, more asterisk-ready. "Maya, honey," she said, in the voice she used for explaining things to small children and elderly relatives, "you've been working yourself into the ground for years. You barely sleep. You barely eat. I think that cheap little computer of yours finally just gave out. It happens." It's not a cheap little computer, it's a custom server rack, and it didn't give out. Someone unlocked my drive with my own fingerprint while I was unconscious. Unconscious, my father repeated, setting his phone down with the air of a man collecting evidence for a case he'd already decided the verdict of. "Maya, you're describing a break-in in our house. With no broken windows, no forced entry, nothing on the doorbell camera. We checked actually this morning because your mother was worried about you. And no sign of anyone touching your computer except the sign that you think someone touched your computer. I'm not saying I think it, I'm saying the logs show it." "What logs, sweetheart?" my mother said and reached out to touch my arm, and I remember flinching from that touch in a way that surprised even me. "You haven't even looked at the computer, you said it doesn't turn on." I looked at the backup drive, before it was wiped too. "There's a login history, which you can't show us," my father said gently, terribly gently, "because by your own account it's gone." I stood there in that kitchen in the house I grew up in, being told with total, seamless confidence that the thing I knew to be true, in my body, in the marrow of my own certainty, had never happened. And the specific cruelty of it, the thing that still, replaying it, makes my hands go cold, is that they weren't even bad at it. They didn't stumble. They didn't contradict each other. It was smooth and warm and endlessly patient, the way you're patient with someone you've already decided is sick. "You've been under a lot of stress," my mother said. "We've noticed you talking to yourself sometimes, losing time, maybe it's worth seeing someone. Losing time. As if the 11 unaccounted hours belonged to my mind and not to their hands. I want to tell you I fought harder. I want to tell you I screamed or called the police right there or did something the version of me that existed before that morning would recognize as strength. I didn't. I went upstairs. I sat on the floor of my ruined server room with my back against the cold metal of an empty rack, and I let myself believe for almost 6 full hours that maybe I really was losing my mind. That's what good gaslighting does. It doesn't just deny your reality. It makes you doubt the machinery you use to perceive reality at all. It was Chloe's Instagram post that broke the spell. It went up 4 days later. A slick, professionally shot photo of Chloe standing in front of a whiteboard covered in architecture diagrams. My architecture diagrams, redrawn in her handwriting but unmistakably, structurally, unforgivably mine captioned. "Some ideas take 5 years to build and 1 moment of courage to share. Announcing Continuum Systems. Rocket." She had kept the name. She hadn't even bothered to change the name. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time, feeling something shift underneath the numbness, something with edges. Not yet rage, rage would come later, and when it came, it wouldn't look like what people expect rage to look like. What I felt, sitting there, was closer to recognition. the specific, clarifying recognition of finally understanding the shape of the thing that had been done to me. I scrolled through the comments, family friends congratulating my parents by name, my mother replying to one of them, "We always knew one of our girls would do something incredible. So proud. One of our girls." I closed the app, and I did something I hadn't done in 3 days, which was think clearly. Here is what clear thinking told me. I had no recording of the theft. I had no drive, no logs, no admin panel showing me the transfer because all of it had been wiped along with everything else. If I went to the police that day, it would be my word, a woman with a documented history of stress and losing time, against 2 loving, distraught parents and a daughter with a slide deck and a dream. I would lose. Worse than lose, I would be recategorized permanently in the family narrative as the daughter who had a breakdown and tried to sabotage her sister out of jealousy. I could see the shape of that story already, pre-written, waiting for me to give them the excuse to tell it. And then I remembered the kill switch. I want to explain this the way it actually happened in my head, not the way it sounds dramatic after the fact. I didn't have a lightning bolt moment of triumphant realization. I had a slow, cold, almost embarrassed memory. The memory of a decision I'd made 18 months earlier, late one night, for reasons I couldn't have fully articulated even to myself at the time, except that some part of me had never fully trusted the house I lived in. Deep in the root kernel of Continuum's architecture, not in the visible code base, not in anything a casual observer skimming the file structure would notice, but embedded in the authentication layer itself, disguised as routine license verification logic, I had built a dead man's switch. Every 30 days, the system required a ping, not a password. A ping authenticated against my specific biometric master key, the same key that had unlocked my backup drive that night. The one thing about me that couldn't be faked, copied, or forgotten, only stolen by force, which is exactly what they'd done. If 30 days passed without that ping, the system would conclude correctly that it no longer belonged to me. It would lock every directory. It would encrypt the runtime environment on any machine it was installed on. And it would transmit, automatically, silently, the host device's IP address and location to a monitored inbox I'd set up at the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, alongside a time-stamped cryptographic proof of authorship log that lived not on any drive in that house, but on 3 separate encrypted cloud servers my family didn't know existed, under a business entity name they'd never heard of. I had built it as a defense against corporate espionage. I had never imagined I'd be using it against my own parents. The theft had happened on a Tuesday night, which meant I knew to the hour when the switch would trigger if no one intervened, which meant I knew something else, something that turned the cold shock in my chest into something quieter and far more dangerous. Whatever Chloe did with that code between now and then, whatever investors she brought in, whatever state lines she crossed to do it, would happen entirely inside a window I already controlled the end of. I understood, sitting on my bedroom floor with my sister's stolen announcement still glowing on my phone screen, that I had a choice. I could go to the police now with nothing but my word and lose, or I could disappear. I could let them believe they'd won. I could let Chloe take my life's work across every state line she wanted, pitch it to every investor she could find, let the theft calcify from a family dispute into something federal, something with wire fraud attached to it, something no amount of gaslighting could soften once men with badges were standing in the room. All I had to do was wait and say nothing, and let their own greed build the case against them better than I ever could. I started counting the days that night, 26 left. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Chloe, not a single friend who might, out of concern, have told me to just go to the police, to just talk to someone, to just try reasoning with my family one more time. I had tried reasoning with my family for 28 years. I understood now, with a clarity that felt almost like relief, that reasoning had never been the right tool for this particular problem. I started packing a bag instead. I moved out on a Thursday, 3 weeks before the deadline, telling my parents only that I needed space to think. My mother cried, which I understood by then as a performance for an audience of one, herself mostly, the story she needed to keep telling about who she was in all of this. My father said I was punishing the family for Chloe's success. which was, in its own way, the most honest sentence either of them said to me that entire month, because it revealed exactly how they understood the situation. Not as theft, but as a zero-sum contest I was sore about losing. I found a sublet 40 minutes away, a studio apartment above a laundromat with thin walls and a landlord who didn't ask questions, and I turned it into the same kind of room I'd always built for myself. Quiet, unremarkable, entirely under my control. The first thing I did was find the cloud backups. 18 months earlier, around the same time I'd built the kill switch, I had also done something that felt at the time like paranoid overkill. I'd set up 3 redundant encrypted backups of Continuum's full codebase and development history, hosted under a shell business entity registered to a PO box, paid for in a way that left no trail back to my parents' address or my personal accounts. I told myself it was standard engineering practice. Redundancy. Disaster recovery. I understand now that some part of me had been preparing for exactly this disaster for a year and a half before it happened. The way people who grew up around unpredictable weather build storm cellars without ever quite admitting to themselves why. Using those backups timestamped, cryptographically signed, showing 5 years of incremental commits under my name alone, I filed a provisional patent application and a formal copyright registration, quietly. No press release, no announcement, nothing that would reach Chloe or my parents. I hired an intellectual property attorney named Priya Desai, a sharp, unsentimental woman who looked at my documentation for 11 minutes before looking back up at me and saying, "This is about as clean a case as I've ever seen. Whoever's using this is going to have a very bad month." I didn't tell her about the kill switch, some things I kept for myself. While I built my case in silence, my family built their celebration in public. Chloe's hype machine ran hot through that entire month. Local news picked up the hometown genius story, a puff piece with a photographer who made her lean against a whiteboard looking thoughtfully into the middle distance. A podcast interview where she used the word vision 11 times and the word we every time she described a technical decision she had never made and couldn't have explained if pressed. My mother posted a countdown graphic to the Tech Expo pitch. 12 days until CHLOE changes everything. My father, who had spent most of his adult life lecturing me about fiscal responsibility, took out a second mortgage on the house and financed a cherry red convertible, which he parked in the driveway 3 days before Chloe had raised a single dollar, because in his mind the money was already real, already earned, already theirs. I watched all of it from 40 minutes away, through screens, with the specific, eerie calm of a woman watching weather roll toward a town that had ignored every warning. I confirmed the date of the Tech Expo pitch against my private countdown and felt something settle in my chest that I can only describe as relief shaped like dread. Day 30 would fall on the exact afternoon of Chloe's live investor demonstration. I hadn't engineered that. The universe, or God, or whatever accounting mechanism exists for this kind of thing, had simply arranged the math so that greed and consequence would arrive in the same room at the same hour, and all I had to do was be there to see it. I bought a ticket to the expo under a name that wasn't mine, through an account that wasn't mine, using a card that wasn't mine. I bought a dark trench coat 2 sizes too large. I practiced in the mirror of my sublet bathroom the specific posture of a woman who wanted to be forgettable, shoulders down, chin down, the universal architecture of someone the world has already decided not to look at. I emailed Priya the morning of the expo, not to ask her to act, just to confirm one more time that everything was filed, timestamped, airtight. "It's been ready for 2 weeks, Maya," she wrote back. "Whatever you're waiting for, I trust you know what you're doing." I wasn't sure I did. I only knew I couldn't stop now, the same way you can't stop a chemical reaction once the 2 elements have already touched. The Silicon Valley Tech Expo auditorium held 900 people, and I made sure I was one of the ones nobody noticed. I took a seat in the back row, off to the side, close enough to an exit to leave without a scene, far enough from the stage that Chloe's eyes, sweeping the crowd for approval the way they always had since we were children, would never land on mine and recognize what they were looking at. My parents sat in the second row, dressed like they were attending a wedding. My mother had brought tissues, already dabbing at her eyes during the opening remarks, before Chloe had said a single technical word. My father's jaw had the set, satisfied look of a man watching a bet he'd already spent the winnings on. The moderator introduced Chloe. The room applauded. Chloe walked out in a blazer I recognized. I'd been with her when she bought it years ago for someone else's interview before either of us knew what this day would cost. And she smiled the smile she'd been perfecting since childhood, the one designed for rooms exactly like this one. She talked for 11 minutes. I timed it without meaning to, the way you count something out of habit rather than need. She used the word revolutionary 3 times. She used the word 41 times to describe an architecture she had never once opened a text editor to build. She said, at one point, gesturing at a slide showing a diagram I had drawn myself at 2 in the morning 18 months earlier. This is the culmination of years of my personal research and development, and I felt the sentence land somewhere just under my sternum, cold and precise, like a diagnosis. I took out my phone, angled the screen down toward my knee out of view of the people beside me, opened the private dashboard I'd built to monitor the kill switch's countdown, the same architecture repurposed, showing me not code but time. Remaining, Chloe gestured to the panel of investors seated at a long table beneath the stage, 5 of them, checkbooks practically already open, and said, with the particular arrogance of someone who has never once had to earn anything the hard way, "And now, I'd like to run the live simulation so you can see Continuum think in real time." Remaining, she walked to the laptop. The room went silent in the specific, expectant way rooms go silent right before something enormous either succeeds or fails. 900 people leaning forward without realizing they were leaning. Remaining, my mother dabbed her eyes again. My father's convertible was parked 4 blocks away, already washed for the celebratory photos he'd planned to take that evening. Remaining, Chloe's finger hovered over the enter key, and she looked up at the audience one last time, soaking in the silence like it was already applause, and I watched my own hand tighten around my phone, and I thought, with a calm that surprised even me after everything, "You should have checked whose fingerprint you used. 000003. 000002. 000001. She pressed enter. For one full second, nothing happened, and in that second I felt the entire architecture of my life balance on a blade's edge, because I had built this failsafe 18 months ago in the dark, tested it only in isolation, and there is always a difference between code that works in theory and code that works in front of 900 people who paid to see something impressive. Then the 100-foot LED screen behind Chloe went from her sleek data visualization to a violent, total red. A siren tore through the auditorium, the same alert tone I'd designed for exactly one purpose and never once imagined I'd hear in a room this size. 900 people flinched as one body. In bold white letters, 3 stories tall, the screen resolved into words that I had written myself in the quiet of my ruined bedroom on a night when I still half believed I was being paranoid for nothing. Critical breach detected. Unauthorized use of stolen intellectual property. True author Maya Lin. FBI Cyber CRIMES Division, NOTIFIED. Chloe froze at the keyboard, her hand still extended over it, her face draining of color in real time, the specific gray of someone watching their own future disappear one word at a time. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman gasped audibly. The investors at the front table were already on their feet, one of them already reaching for his phone, not to invest, I understood, but to make very certain his firm's name appeared nowhere near whatever was about to happen. My mother's tissue stayed frozen halfway to her face. My father's satisfied jaw had gone slack, his mouth open on a sentence he would never finish. I checked my phone one final time. Not the countdown. The countdown was over, had done its work, had nothing left to tell me. I checked instead the confirmation message that arrived in the same instant from Priya Desai's office, an automated notification triggered by the exact filing I'd made weeks earlier. Federal referral submitted. Law enforcement notified per prior arrangement. The auditorium doors opened at the back, both of them, wide, deliberate, the way doors open when the people opening them have no interest in being subtle. 6 federal agents in dark jackets moved down the center aisle in a formation that had clearly been briefed and rehearsed, because Priya had made certain, days earlier, that the FBI's cybercrimes division had my provisional patent, my copyright registration, and my sworn statement in hand well before this moment ever arrived, so that when the automated ping finally confirmed the theft in real time, there was no ambiguity left for anyone to hide inside. Chloe Lynn, the lead agent said, reaching the stage as security did nothing to stop him, because security understood immediately exactly what kind of morning this was. You're under arrest for felony theft of intellectual property and wire fraud. Chloe didn't run. There was nowhere to run to, and some old, stubborn part of her even then seemed to be waiting for someone, our mother, our father, the moderator, God, to intervene and explain that this was all a misunderstanding, that surely someone would fix this the way things had always been fixed for her. No one did. 2 more agents moved to the second row. My mother stood up too fast, her tissue falling to the carpet, already saying there must be some mistake in the exact gentle, reasonable voice she'd used on me in that kitchen 5 weeks earlier. And I felt something in my chest that was not quite satisfaction and not quite grief, something more like the specific stillness of a wound finally being looked at directly instead of hidden under gauze. "Are you the parents of the individual on stage?" the agent asked. My father tried the tone, the mild, wounded, reasonable tone that had worked on me my entire life. "Officer, I think there's been some kind of technical error. You're both named in the federal complaint as co-conspirators in the theft," the agent said, without inflection, without cruelty, without any of the performance my parents had spent 5 weeks perfecting. "You have the right to remain silent." I watched my mother's face as the handcuffs went on, watched her search the crowd. Not for a lawyer, not for an explanation, but for me, some instinct in her finally understanding. In the last possible second it could still matter, exactly whose face had been missing from this story the whole time. Her eyes swept the back rows once, twice, and never found me, because I had learned at last, after 28 years, exactly how to become the kind of person this family never bothered to look at. I stood up quietly while the auditorium dissolved into chaos, while phones rose into the air to film it, while the investors filed out murmuring words like liability and due diligence to each other in the tone of men rewriting a story they would tell at dinner parties for years. I walked down the side aisle, unremarkable, unrecognized, the same way I had walked in. I stopped only once, at the small side table near the stage where a young event coordinator stood holding a clipboard, utterly lost in the pandemonium. "I need to speak to whoever's handling the server hardware," I said, showing her a folder I'd prepared weeks in advance, registration documents, copyright filings, a notarized ownership claim. "That equipment belongs to me. I have the paperwork." She looked at the folder, looked at the chaos on stage, looked back at me with the dawning, disbelieving recognition of someone finally understanding who they were actually looking at. "You're," she started. "Maya Lin," I said. "Yes." I didn't go to any of the hearings that followed, not out of avoidance, but because I didn't need to watch it to know how it would end. Priya kept me updated in clean, clinical emails. The investors withdrew every term sheet within 48 hours. My father's second mortgage came due on a house that would be sold within the year to cover legal fees neither of my parents had budgeted for. Chloe took a plea deal that still left her looking at years, not months, because federal wire fraud does not bend the way family arguments always had. I claimed my servers 3 weeks later in a quiet county evidence facility from a bored technician who slid a clipboard across a folding table without once looking up. I signed my name. I loaded 4 drives into the trunk of a car I'd bought with money I'd earned freelancing in the 5 weeks I'd spent waiting. I drove back to my sublet above the laundromat, carried the drives up 2 flights of stairs myself, and set them down on a desk in a room nobody had ever bothered to check on, in a life nobody had handed me and no one could take back. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that because I think people expect triumph, and what I actually felt, sitting there in the quiet with my life's work finally, legally, undeniably mine again, was something closer to exhaustion laced with a strange, brittle kind of peace. The specific quiet that comes only after a wound has finally, fully, stopped being denied. Continuum was still there, still mine, still exactly what I'd built it to be. I opened my laptop, and I began, for the first time in 5 weeks, to work.